Hey guys, welcome. Fedora Friday number 16. Man, I think I just made it in here. Hopefully my lighting's okay. I've been messing around with my lighting setup. I can see it's very bright over here. I'm gonna see if I can go and adjust that right real quick. Um, let's see. Let's see if that does any better. Let me close this door. All right, let's see if that does. Okay, that's a little bit better with the brightness, I guess. All right, well, it is the day after Christmas. I'm trying to fix my hair because my hair is a wreck. I'm trying to kind of grow my hair out for now. So it's kind of like it's kind of in that in between stage. So yeah, just gonna have to pardon my setup right now. It just feels like I said, I'm still like getting back on track. But it's good to be back on the air. You know what I mean? Good to be back. We got a great movie lined up for today. This will be kind of a shorter show. This is another one of those movies that I'm like, I should probably have prepared better. Like this movie deserves better. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? I like to keep it fresh. I like to keep it extemporaneous, right? So we'll just deal with it as it is. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed your Christmas yesterday. I know I did. Like I said, I've been kind of just huddled up with family, which is kind of the best way, right? I mean, I think that's the what it's all about here during this time of year. And I think we had a very good show on Hat Tuesday with Paul. That really kind of inspired a lot of ideas in my head. And I've been talking with Paul and with Robert. So there's a couple ideas for upcoming shows that we're very excited about. So we'll bring that to you, shortly, probably in the new year. So right now the game plan is, if I can help it, is to kind of do kind of an end of year show for our for Hat Tuesday number 17, right? So I think that would put us in right on the 30th, right? So that'll put us on the 30th for Hat Tuesday. We'll do that, and kind of just go over like the year, like things that we, that we've kind of gone through to the degree that people want to share. Like I said, I know everybody kind of goes through their own thing, and sometimes they don't want to share that, and that's okay. But what I like to do is just invite all the board members that we've had, any guests that if you're watching this and you were a guest at some point on Good Luke's, you're definitely welcome to come back. Again, even if you don't want to talk about like your 2025, right? The other flip side of that is what we're hoping to kind of accomplish, maybe ideas or things that were like are on your mind about 2026. And even if you're not part of the show, I encourage you to kind of do that. I think that's always a good idea for you to reflect, right? And to kind of set goals for yourself, right? And I've had, if you've kind of been talking to me privately, I've probably been mentioning something like that, like setting goals for the next year, only because that's something that's top of my mind, right? So definitely things that I want to accomplish, and I'll share a little bit more about that to the degree that that it makes sense in the next show, in that Hat Tuesday show. So we'll keep it moving. It's gonna be, like I said, it's gonna be a fun ride. It's already been a fun ride for 2025, right? Like I said, it's been some growing pains, but also some really good stuff, man. Some stuff that I'm really especially proud of. That we were able to accomplish on this channel, and I'm gonna try to do my best to cover that, and then give others a forum to be able to talk about their situations as well, to the degree that folks want to do that. But yeah, it's hard to believe that 2025 is already coming to an end. It feels like we just started, right? Feels like we just started 2025, and man, now we got to get ready for 2026. But I'm excited, right? At the same time, it's unbelievable, but I'm also excited about the 2026, right? So always a good time for like fresh starts, fresh beginnings, right? And to kind of develop those good habits, right? Just like I said, just like our hat collections don't stay stagnant. So do our, does our career journeys, our school journeys, our life journeys. They don't stay stagnant. I got my good friend Paul.
Hey.
Paul,
hello, Luke. Nice to see you. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas. Happy Christmas. Hopefully you had a fantastic Christmas with you and your family. I know I did. It was great. I know we've had some discussions privately, and I'm just amazed that this year has gone by so quickly, right? And right, so I didn't start this channel. I didn't start my first live stream till August 4th. So that kind of leaves us, what, it was at 4 or 5 months, that this channel has started. And there's so much that I'm proud of. And I know we've talked about that. So Tuesday, I'm hoping that yourself and then maybe some of the other folks that we have, anybody that's appeared on this channel at all, either on video or even just in the chat, if they want to jump on or just talk about, something what we talked about, which is, things that maybe they're very proud, or things they've gone through in 2025, right? Kind of reflect a little bit on what's going on. Maybe just accomplishments as well. Like, even if you don't want to talk about bad stuff, you can just talk about, it'll be a good time to just brag. Like it's okay to brag, right? I mean, sometimes we have to celebrate our wins, even if even if we don't think they're huge wins. Sometimes the small wins kind of lead up to the big wins. And, I want to provide that forum. That was basically your idea, Paul. I really love that. And I want to do that.
I think an interesting thing to do as you get older, okay, you reflect even further back because you've lived a lot longer. And one thing that I've sort of learned is that when you're setting goals for yourself, be realistic,
Yes.
And make sure you can measure them, and they're sort of targeted and all that sort of thing. Because if you think about it, if you set a goal that you want to start a business from nothing and turn over £100,000 in the first year, right, that's a big goal. But if you said to yourself, actually, I want to start a business, I want to try it out, I don't want to expose myself too much financially, I want to achieve maybe £1,000 a month, maybe £2,000, depending on what your position is and the time you can put in. But things that, okay, if you exceed your goal in the first 5 months of the 12 months year, reassess it. But you would have achieved your goal. There's nothing worse than setting a goal and then feeling as though, actually, I've been a bit optimistic here. Right. And also, you feel as though I've got to achieve that. And then you start exposing yourself, whether it's financially or your time commitment or the amount of time that you don't give to the family because you're focusing on this. So I guess what I'm saying is to keep a balance, and I haven't done that through the years. I'm just saying that perhaps I'm doing it now, right? But I didn't do it for many years, and I paid the price. But I think what we've collectively we've had a good year. All right, we've only known each other since August time, I guess. But when I look at the year on a personal level for the different projects I've been working on, and I think, that's been good. I've got through the year. I've paid all my bills. I don't owe any money, of any substance. And I just think, I feel okay. And it's not bad to feel okay. You haven't got to feel as though you've got the biggest house on the block, you've got the best car on the street, you're buying the biggest round of drinks tonight in the bar. No, just be part of what's going on and enjoy it.
I completely agree, my friend. You said so many great things. One, let me just start off by repeating, Paul was basically talking about setting, you can set difficult goals, but make sure that they're attainable goals, right? Because the idea is to motivate yourself to be able to keep going, right? So, give yourself, it's okay to challenge yourself, because some folks are really, they're really up for the challenge. You have to kind of take inventory of yourself and your situation. So the idea is, don't become a hatter and try to overtake Lock & Co. In a year, because that's going to be an uphill battle, you know?
I mean, the name of my business, as you know, is the Smart Center, is the limited company. Right. And it was set up a long time ago when I was doing, first of all, I was doing some consultancy work, and then I actually had smart sensors, as in the smart cars. But
Right.
but the smart the idea was there's this acronym, being what is it? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time orientated. And that's looking at goals and setting things within business. And I thought that was a great way of summing up what I was trying to do as a business and help other people. So I guess I just sort of remembered that whilst I was talking with you. Thought, come on, Paul.
It is okay.
Do you know, over these last 3 days, my wife and I don't take many holidays, and we don't have, I tend to work quite long days because I like working. And doing nothing over the last week has been as tiring as being very busy, if not more tiring. And we've been out for a walk today for the first time in 3 weeks. We went down to the beach and walked along and what have you. And it was quite blowy, and it was about 5 degrees Celsius, so it's quite cold. And I think, we both come back and felt, we're very tired now and cold, but I think, and my brain's, frazzled, so forgive me, but
no, you're doing great.
You're absolutely right. It's just thinking about the people that are around you, your circumstances, and if you were sat here in 12 months' time, what do you feel good about doing? And think about the different areas of your life. So you've got your personal area, you've got your business area, you've got your hobbies, you've got your finances, you've got your family relationships, all of those sort of things. Think about them, and what would you like to see changed if you could, or at least influence over the next 12 months? Write them all down. And then this time next year, have a look and see where you are. Mark yourself out of 10. Who knows? You may well have exceeded some of them, and you may not have even touched on others. But it's a fun thing to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. The other aspect you mentioned, and I really, because it hits home in terms of the business world, is the idea of benchmarking, right? And benchmarking is something that you have to kind of do very, very carefully, right? Because sometimes, again, like I mentioned before, the extreme example of somebody benchmarking themselves to let's say a Lock & Co. It's been in our conversations throughout, and I don't mean to pick on Lock & Co. I just think so highly of them, especially now after our experience just a couple weeks ago. And for them, or somebody like a Borsalino or a Stetson, like those are great to try to aspire to, but those brands were not created overnight. But if you can find, because I think benchmarking is great, but there is also the danger of that old adage of saying comparison sometimes is the thief of all joy. And I don't know if it was Mark Twain that said that, but I always take heart of that because, it's related to that concept of keeping up with the Joneses, right? Where we just want more because, I don't know, we see somebody else with more and we feel like, well, they seem like they're doing okay. And everybody's situation is so different, right? I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of Warren Buffett. I'm pretty confident I will never attain the success that Warren Buffett has achieved. It doesn't mean that I can't admire him and I can't learn, his process that he used so that I can achieve maybe a financial goal or a business goal. So we want to use benchmarking as a tool to motivate ourselves, not to, I guess, just to make it simple, not demotivate ourselves and pigeonhole ourselves and essentially stop our progress. Because I know that I think it was Hemingway that said, I'm going to butcher this, but he said it is not noble to be superior to your fellow man. It is noble to be superior to your former self. And I think it hits directly at the head of that idea of not necessarily trying to keep up with the Joneses. Yourself, you're the ultimate Jones. Your past self is the ultimate Jones that you should try to keep up and surpass, right? So as long as, let's say you had a better year than last year, and maybe you didn't have a bad year last year, but you say, you know what, let's up the ante just a little bit, right? Let's tighten up this, let's tweak that. That's okay. At least in my mind. Again, I'm no one to tell somebody how to motivate themselves. Everybody, I think, is different. But for me, I always take heart to that adage of trying to, one, take stock of where I've been, and then use that as the tool to get to direct me where I'm going.
I think that's really admirable to be looking at that and taking that way of looking at it. I think on the business front within the hat environment, for me, what's quite exciting, and bear in mind, we haven't really talked about this, but part of my history, if you like, is that I've been called in by companies to help change industries and change direction, look at their business model and how can it be extended and so on. And that was in the computer world, the telecommunication world, some of the fashion world, and so I've made some pretty big changes. Now I look at the hatting world and I think, on the one hand you've got the names, and you've mentioned the two, Lock & Co, Borsellino and so on. Lock & Co is more of it's the 10th oldest company in the world, and the oldest hat company in the world. Now, when you take a look at companies like that, not necessarily Lock & Co, but companies that have been around for many, many years, they must have done something right. Because in the UK, we get, for every 100 companies that are opened, in 5 years' time, there might be like 7 or 8 companies left still going. There's a big fallout, and the fallout really is because a lot of people, they know their skill, they know their product, but what they don't know is how to run a business. And so there's two sides of actually going into business. And one's, as I say, running the business, understanding cash flow, understanding margin, understanding how to manage people, all of the sort of 7 sectors of that are involved in terms of disciplines in running a business. Now, what we could really benefit from within the hatting world, and you and I looking at is the business models that make these companies. Why are they so successful? Why are they still in business? What is their model? And what we'll probably find is that it's very, very close to the model that's used in the fashion world in general, the high fashion world, the couture world, the jewelry world. And in other words, they work on high profit margins. They rely on high amounts of marketing. They market their products around the visual representation of aspiration. So it's very much towards if you buy one of our hats, you are going to be looking like Clark Gable or somebody that's really debonair and whoever that might be. And I think when you start looking at that, and then you start looking at, okay, what's their process? And you look, I mean, do you remember all the stock that Lock & Co had? Had lots of boxes on, so whether or not they had hats, we don't know, but they had an awful lot of other stock in drawers and on show, and so did Bates & Co at Hilditch & Kay. They had an awful lot of stock around the place, and you think, well, there are not many hatters that we speak to that are small hatters that keep a lot of stock. I didn't realize until talking more with Robert, for instance, that he doesn't, from what I understand, doesn't keep an awful lot of stock. Yet I'm surrounded with maybe 80 to 100 hats that are already made up, and then another 125, 150 felts ready to be made up. My choice, because I wanted to actually go through the process of making and remaking the same style of hat, so I knew I could get continuity, working with the different weights of felts, from the lightweight through to the dress weight through to the Western weight, and really understanding the whole discipline and cramming it into a short period of time. And of course, that's an investment of time and stuff, but it's really exciting to think that, okay, as hatters, yes, we can set goals, but maybe we need to look backwards at the wider, bigger, why is hatting being successful? Why is it now not so popular? What can we do, if anything, in a small way to take this forward? And what is realistic to think in the marketplace that's possible? Because, we've got all the old-fashioned tools, for instance, that are being used for hatting. They're all going. They're either being lost when people pass away, or they're just not being made anymore. So there is this 3D printing, and you think, okay, well, 3D printing is okay. I've tried some of the tools, and in fact, I've got one here, but this is one I just got to try out. It's a 3D rim, which, and believe it or not, this is around £50. Now,
Wow.
if you know the one I bought and had made, I had to wait 3 months for it, and it cost me nearly £200. But anyway, I digress. But I mean, I'm just saying that, you know, there's in setting goals for the year, we're in quite an exciting time right now. I think,
Agreed.
you know, in small, because let's be fair, most of us that we talk to on the forums here and things, we're small hatters. And when I say small, I mean, you know, anything under 500 hats a year, I'd say is small. And most people are doing probably around 100 hats a year. And actually, if you can get 100 hats, custom hats to make in a year, you should be doing okay. You wouldn't necessarily be able to make a full-time living out of it. And that is that's another part of the goal setting thing, and the things that you and I were talking about, you know, earlier on, as how can we elevate this for individuals? Because, you know, I started thinking about why are so many of the hatters that we hear about that maybe started 4, 5, 6 years ago are no longer in business. Now, have they gone into hatting thinking that it's going to be their full-time job, given up their job role, found that they can't actually provide for their family, haven't got the continuity of sales and so on, and then they've lost heart? And I can understand that. So therefore, do we have to support within ourselves, within our community, for people to do it as a second job for them, you know, or a second hobbyist type way of earning money and still having fun, but still contributing to the hatting community? And you know, it's a very big quandary for me. Is would I like to see 100 small hatters actually doing it alongside their other full-time business and extending their skills and actually helping us grow the popularity of wearing hats? Or would we like to see 10 that have gone out and borrowed lots of money and created fantastic shops and got all this equipment, but then the marketplace isn't there? Because you know, right now the marketplace, I think it's probably growing upwards, but I think in the UK especially, and you saw this when you're over here, is that in Stetson and in others in Laird, lots of caps were being purchased. And a lot of those Baker Boy type wider Irish type caps were being purchased. And so the Trilby and the Fedora still has a long way to catch up, because, as you know, you walk down the street with a fedora on, people go, whoa, okay, yeah, they either like it or they don't, or, you know, they go, oh, you're the man or you're not the man.
They run a mile. No, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So there's lots of exciting things there, I think, to consider. And what would be nice is to chat those things over with a few people. And you know what, even as a channel, you know, if we had like 4 goals or something that as a collective of you know, 4 or 5 hat makers, you know, what would we like to see that we could affect in the marketplace at all? I don't know, we could, but you know, it would be great if our other friends could come on and discuss things like this.
No, I completely agree, Paul. I mean, I think you hit on something which is again another theme that I talked about, the idea of cooperation and collaboration. You know, it's at the heart of one of my personal beliefs, which, you know, I've shared, you know, probably ad nauseum, which is the idea of expanding the pie and the fact that it's not a zero-sum game. And I think that's where a lot of hatters, either because they don't feel like anybody's going to help them out, or for some reason they're stubborn and want to do it on their own. And, you know, and more power to them if they really are set in that mindset. But I feel like sometimes they can pigeonhole themselves, because having a network is always a good thing, you know, that you can leverage for ideas, for advice, right? So chances are, if you're dealing with somebody else in the same industry is probably either has already dealt with it successfully, or they're going through the same thing at the current time, and they're just looking for somebody to like say, hey, I'm going through this. Are you going through this? You know what I mean? Like sometimes I think as men, we have that idea of being almost too strong and too stubborn for our own good, and we don't want to admit that we're having a tough go at it. But it only takes one person, right? Sometimes it only takes one person to say, hey, I'm having this problem. Are you? And then the whole the whole dam opens up, and all of a sudden you got a bunch of folks that are going through the same thing, and now they're supporting each other, and now they've got several brains trying to tackle the same problem, and then all of a sudden now it doesn't seem like such a big problem anymore. When you find out that you're not alone in it, it almost feels like a little bit more. It's not as bad.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think the other thing for hatters is that a lot of hatters decide to specialize in certain styles. I mean, I did some research before I started, and I particularly wanted to follow on my website. You'll see that my grandfather was a big influence for me, and he was very much into his trilby hats dating back to the 1940s and what have you. And he it was quite a high crown, and I sort of really admired that shape, which I thought, you know what, I can't see many people making the sort of 1940s, 1950s high front to the crown hats with fairly large brims on, and so that's where I started. And the reason for saying that is a bit like if I was just selling I don't know, sports jackets. You know, if you wanted a sports jacket, you might find me. But actually, if you went to a department store where they sell sports jackets, trousers, shirts, and everything that's, you know, male fashion, then you would have a choice. And I can't help thinking that in the UK, especially, the more and more I think about this, you know, we've got a whole island of 60, I don't know, I think it's about 63 million people. If I said to anybody, where do you go to buy a hat? They would say for a run-of-the-mill hat, maybe Marks and Spencer's, which is a sort of average, you know, run-of-the-mill store, I guess. And if you wanted a really smart hat, then you'd probably go down to London or Manchester. You'd visit one or two of the brands that you know, and you pay quite a lot of money for it. Now, wouldn't it be better to do something like you know, an Amazon or a I mean, I was in mail order for many years and provided this type of thing for a brand called American Express, a small company, I know, but you know, it happened to do quite well. But the point being that you know, when you look at the hatters that you've had on, like with Brian Forbes and his style of hat, very different to myself. But as a customer, if you were coming to a store and you saw Brian's, you saw Roberts, you saw mine, you saw, you know, lots of the other vendors, actually, all of a sudden, you've got choice that's really pretty wide, as well as the materials, the colors, and if you then had a whole similar system of going through, knowing that these individuals are very, very good at their art, they'll take you through a process that is probably 95% the same, whoever takes you through that journey. And then you feel more comfortable that you've got maybe a consumer type charter or promise that we all adhere to about then selling the products to the consumer. It's just a thought, isn't it, that that if we're not selling many fedoras and trilbies in the UK, why is that? Is it because people don't know where to go and buy them, and therefore they don't bother? They buy other hats, or is it? And so, you know, do we owe it to people to make it more accessible? I don't really know the answer to that, but it's a dilemma that's worth discussing.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. This is, like I said, I feel like in our discussions, well, not just on screen but also off screen, we've already come up with some ideas that I'm really excited about. I think we're going to hit the ground running in 2026. And but before I forget, I want to make sure, because I do love the hat that you're wearing, the open roll style hat. If you want to talk about that or any of your other hats that you've been working on.
I just thought, it being Christmas, I thought, well, you know, a nice sort of rusty red hat. And I've been I've been wearing my green hats as well, and I've got matching scarves and things. So whenever I go out, I've been wearing something. It's a bit more festive, isn't it, than just wearing a beige or a brown. But this one's, it's one of my open road hats. It's a 100% rabbit fur felt. It's the typical 2 3/4 inch brim, and forgotten, I think it's 10 centimeters at the crown. But it's they're so comfortable, and they're so, I mean, this one's about 220 grams, so it's really quite a stiff hat. And it, you know, with these open roads, I love it that the front comes down. I haven't really played with this one so much, but my silver belly colored one is much better. But you know, you can wear it you can wear it more like a fedora as well. So
I love that you pointed that out because a lot of folks don't realize that you can do that on an open road. And obviously, I think a lot more folks are familiar with the lid up, but it doesn't mean you can't just snap that thing down.
This is very casual for wearing your jeans or well, you could wear it quite formally, but this I think is a nice. If I was wearing a sports jacket and trousers, you know, I'd be quite happy to wear an open road with the brim down, and that would formalize it a little bit more, you know.
Yeah, I love the color rust because, again, very similar to wine, except I feel like the wine color, we had that extensive discussion about the color wine during our tour in London, and it just it has a little bit of that like festive but also classic and elegant look to it. It kind of is a do-it-all type of color. I feel rust has that same cachet.
I think it's look, for me, I think we, especially in the UK, we've been very much into our browns, greys, and blacks and blues to a degree, and I just wanted to bring some more color to the style of hats, because honestly, Fepsa do some beautiful shades of blues and greens, and I mean they do a really nice peppermint beaver fur felt, but it's £300 just for the one felt.
Wow.
So it's been I've been like, oh, I'd love to buy that. I'd love to really make a hat out of that. I had one client that was interested in it, but when I said, look, you know, I'll charge you an hourly rate, as it were, for making the hat up, because I'd love to make a hat in this, but it's still going to cost you £600 for a beautiful fedora. And it was like, oh, okay, but I said, look, if you went to Lock and Curl to one of our other great shops in London, you're looking at a £1,500 hat here. You know, this is the sort of serious type of hat you're talking about. Or Nick Fouquet, well, I don't know how much he would charge for it, but probably more like £2,000. So, you know, it's I like color, to put color back into hats, and I don't mind looking a bit silly. I look, you know, perhaps a little bit different sometimes when you wear something that's a brighter color.
That's the thing. I mean, I think you found you found like that medium, right? So essentially, obviously, going to something a lot more, maybe a bright red like this, or even a stark white, might be a little too much too soon. But I think with the wine and now with the rust, you found that really. And I'm gonna be honest, the green's another color that is elegant, and it has a little bit of that festive vibe, especially during Christmas. Obviously, when you wore your green fedora, I mean, that's and then the green and wine color, which Ian had, really, I mean, Ian very well that color combo.
I made that for Ian, and he absolutely loves it. But I mean, this is I really like this. Look, it's quite a high crown, as you can see. It's probably nearly 5 inches, and that's a 50mm wide ribbon. And of course, you know, this is not something that most people will jump into as their first hat. This is something that you'd need to be quite comfortable in wearing a fedora before you jump into it. But once you get into it and you think, this is all right. It feels comfortable. It's nice and light. This is just the dress weight, about 130 grams, something like that. But with a bit of stiffener in it and so on. I quite like that with a teardrop on the top. If
you're a fan of Dillinger like Ian is, then you're definitely going to be loving that kind of style hat. And like I said, it's one of those things where that's why I love the fact that Ian is out there in London wearing his hat and essentially normalizing this hat, because essentially now somebody's going to look at that. And Ian just has one of those faces. I always talk about it. Hopefully he doesn't mind. But he has one of those faces that glow. So it's kind of like, it's impossible that he's going to leave a bad impression when he wears that hat. And they'll probably ask him, hey, who made that hat for you? And then sure enough, he'll let them know. It's like, I love that. I love that.
Well, I mean, look, I think I made him that other one for Christmas, which was the same type of felt, but more of the Stratoliner dimensions. So I thought, you know, Ian, as he sent down a couple of hats for me to modify for him, because one of them with the brim was too wide and so on. And I thought, you know what, I'd really like to, you know, make you something like the Stratoliner that I think would really suit you, and perhaps you haven't tried before. So I do hope that he's enjoying it and getting somewhere out of it. But I mean, he put it on the day and he seemed to like it. So
he was like I said, just like I was a kid in a candy store, and like I said, you can see it, and then he has one of those like magnetic smiles. Like I said, he has a very kid-like presence about him, and I feel like it's just fun. It's just somebody having fun. You know, and that's what it's all about. You know, I will, you know, just FYI, I will be doing a live stream with my brother pretty soon. It might happen in the new year, but I would definitely be wearing, because we're gonna do on my sports channel. We're gonna do our very first live stream talking about the Mets. He's a Yankees fan, so we're gonna do like a state of the art, and I will be wearing my Mets Fedora on screen for the first time. So I'm excited about that. So a lot of good things to come. And you know, one of the things, I have a trip. I already found out my next trip. I will be going to Puerto Rico next month.
Wow.
I'm finalizing the dates. Yep. So if anybody that's watching this is on the island, then definitely you know, drop me a line. And you know, I don't know if they have the kind of hat shops on the island like we would find in London, but I do know that the Panama hat is definitely alive and well throughout the Caribbean, you know, as well as Florida. And I will have to kind of see what I'm going to do in terms of my headwear for the island. So I'm excited about that.
Brilliant. No, well, I wish you well with that. I wish you well. And I know you were going to be reviewing a film today, so I just wanted to. I didn't expect to be on for this long, so I'm sorry I've taken up so much of your time.
No worries, Paul. Always a pleasure having you. Like I said, if you need to drop off, I will go into the film right this moment. It's another kind of urban crime drama, but this one, I feel like I'm a broken record. I feel like I'm not as prepared as I should be in every review, but I'm just gonna wing it, you know.
I'll leave you to it, and I will dip into it later on. But otherwise, let me know when your next ones are, and if you want me on there, I'll be on there.
You got it, my friend. Paul, thanks, have a great one.
Take care, Luke.
All the best.
And you. Bye-bye.
Ciao. All right, Paul John Murphy, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, always a pleasure to have him on screen. You know, and I will, you know, I will scroll his banner again if you didn't catch it, just to kind of support this man, because again, you know, he has been pivotal to all the success that we've experienced here in this short amount of time. Like I said, I started streaming in the beginning of August 4th, I believe, was my first live stream. You know, so yeah, it's easy to kind of say, well, the channel's still pretty small. And yes, it's pretty small, but I don't think we would have been anywhere close to where we're at right now without folks like Paul, you know, folks like Robert, Josh, Morgan, Ian, Brian, Steve, and Brad, you know, all the folks that have appeared on this channel. And hopefully I didn't leave anybody out. But if you've been on this channel, either on screen or even in the comments, you're a big part of the success that we've had, and it's been a successful year. So, you know, we'll hope to keep it going in 2026. Again, I don't know. Maybe I'll wake up one day and be like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. But right now, I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm going to keep it going. So, you know, support Paul, support all the folks that are part of this network. You'll find a lot of their links on my YouTube homepage. You'll see, I think, featured channels or something like that. I forgot what I called it. But you'll find it. You'll see Josh's channel. You'll see Paul's channel. You'll see Brad's channel. And if you're part of my Good Luke's network, and you have a YouTube channel, definitely drop me a line. I want to make sure that I support everybody in my network, you know, and their channels. Like I said, we're all in this together. So yeah, now back to the movie. The movie, I'm gonna tell you. Let me just bring up this this slideshow here. This is one of those movies that, like, I watched. It hit very close to home. This is based in New York. I think the filming location for New Jack City came out in 1991. The filming location was the Bronx, the Boogie Down Bronx. And it's such a compelling movie. Like this, anybody that's a fan of urban crime dramas, right? I featured King of New York on this channel. That might have been the only other urban crime drama that I featured up to this point. But it really is like kind of a perfect segue to the films that I've been reviewing lately. What did I do? I did King of New York, and the last time I did, I'm trying to remember here. I'm trying to remember if I don't think King of New York was the last one. Let me just go and see. Oh, I did Crush Groove. You know, that was urban, but it wasn't a crime drama. But this movie kind of fits in with those two, King of New York, especially King of New York, and Crush Groove, about like the style that we talked about, right? But this movie goes even further, right? So this movie goes beyond that, right? It was directed. I'm showing here Mario Van Peebles, right? You guys may know him. He's a pretty well-known actor, right? He's a, you know, kind of got those handsome leading man looks. I think his dad was, I'm trying to remember his dad's name, was in the industry as well. So he's like a legacy. But he directed this film, and it really is like, you know, people describe it as kind of an urban Scarface, right? You know, everybody knows Scarface, at least the remake Scarface with Al Pacino that came out in 1983. And this movie is definitely very connected to that. But in addition to that, this movie is special because, you know, it also has elements of The Untouchables, right? A movie that I've covered here on a past Fedora Friday. It also has a little tiny bit of the element of The Godfather, right? So it really is. But Scarface is probably the most connected, and they even pay homage to the movie within this movie, right? They're watching it on screen, and kind of you know, they're making that direct connection. They're like, hey, yeah, if you're seeing urban Scarface, it's no accident. This is basically kind of a you know, well, just that, an urban version of the movie Scarface. And I love that movie. I haven't covered Scarface on this channel because it's not really a hat movie, but that's something that I know my brother really thinks highly of, that movie, and maybe we'll cover that on a pyramid stream. So look out for that. But yeah, Mario Van Peebles directed this film, and the thing about it is that it's couched in, right, just like Scarface was couched in like the cocaine fueled 80s. This movie is couched into the peak of the crack epidemic in New York that kind of took hold in the late 80s and early 90s, right? I believe crack cocaine came out, was invented in the mid 80s, but it started really like rearing its ugly head in the urban community, especially in New York. I know it went elsewhere, but you know, I grew up in Brooklyn, so I had a very, very, you know, especially I grew up in a time, like I want to say in the late 80s. I was you know, 10, 11, 12 years old, right? During that area, it was like I knew what was going on, and I saw what was happening to the people in my community around me. So this movie really hits hard. And Mario Van Peebles, you know, bless him for you know, directing this film. It really was necessary. So even though it's easy to chalk up as a kind of another urban crime drama, it isn't. It really does have a social commentary to it. I'll show you some more photos of Mario. You can see here, he's not only directed the movie, but he also co-starred. He played like, I believe it was a police lieutenant, a character called Stone, right? He's kind of like a mid-level manager, kind of. I want to call him a lieutenant. You know, somebody that's supervisory and is trying to address the drug problem in New York. So I'll show you some more photos. You can see Mario Van Peebles, like I said, he's a legacy kind of actor. And you know, he really did a great job with this movie. Like, the cast is just stunning. You can see him here working behind the camera, right? This is just, I want to say this is a movie that was a labor of love. I think it had an $8 million budget, right? So it's like it didn't have no budget, but it wasn't like a super duper budget, right? You know, I'm just thinking early 90s, whether $8 million was like a huge budget or not. I feel like it wasn't even back then, but maybe I was wrong. You guys can let me know. But yeah, like I mentioned, this movie focuses on the crack epidemic. You have here, right, just like last week, we talked about Chris Rock making an appearance. Well, here in New Jack City, he didn't just make an appearance. He was a pivotal character. He was essentially the face of the crack epidemic in this movie. You can see he plays a character called Pookie Robinson, right? And besides the kind of the name that sounds kind of like, kind of a funny character's name, but it is such a compelling character because Pookie is caught up in, he's hooked on crack, right? That's something that they show right from the get-go, and it shows you kind of the decline of the youth in New York City. And wow, it's just a really great portrayal by Chris Rock. Again, I don't know if this is considered like his first serious role, but he did a great job as Pookie. And we'll talk a little bit more about Pookie's role, in a little bit. Sorry, my eyes are burning a little bit. Maybe it's just too much light. But yeah, but besides Pookie in representing the face, right, we have Wesley Snipes, right? So let me just go into Wesley Snipes, right? Wesley Snipes is basically Tony Montana in this movie, right? And you can see he's rocking the headwear, right? He's got that that flat cap style, right? I know this might be there might be a better name than just a flat cap. This is just a version of that oversized flat cap style that was just very popular in I want to say the 70s, the 80s, and into the early 90s. Right? He just has style, right? Like this is a guy, right? We look at the gold chain. We talked about this last week with Crush Groove. This is how the rappers were dressing, right? Back in the day. And it's because, right, this is the way the drug dealers, the ones that had the money in the neighborhood, were dressing this way, right? They were very flashy, right? They had the big Dookie rope chain, gold chains. They had the big medallions. They had the flashy clothes, right? And the rappers, because they wanted to they were trying to portray an image of success, and these are the guys that they were watching in their neighborhoods that were the successful people, right? Some of them didn't live that long, but while they were living, right, or they were in jail, while they were out and free, they were dressing like this because they had more money than they knew what to do with, right? And the kids were watching this, not just the rappers. Well, the rappers were kids as well, but they were watching this. Everybody was watching this and watching these individuals that were making this money by selling this this drug that was destroying the community. It was just a powerful message that this movie was trying to capture. It was a real life message about what was going on at the time. Remember, this movie came out in 1991, so crack was still, right? It wasn't over, right? This was not a movie that came out in the 2000s or later. That's looking back at the crack epidemic. This is pretty much the height, right, of the crack epidemic. It's already got its kind of its claws on the community, and particularly the Black and Latino community in New York City, and it just rings true. It almost seems like a documentary sometimes, although it is obviously fictionalized. But Nino Brown is a character that existed in many neighborhoods. Right? They even talked about it in the movie. Like there's tons of Nino Browns around. There still will be, right? It may not even be crack anymore, right? So it might be meth or whatever the drugs, right? Opioids, opium, whatever the I don't know. Sorry, I'm not that familiar with a lot of the drugs out there. But you will always have, as long as you have illegal drugs, you will always have these kingpins, and it's very akin to like the Prohibition era movies that we watch, right? When alcohol became illegal in the US, you had these barons that would rise, and they were kind of very similar to these drug lords during the crack epidemic, similar to the cocaine drug lords during the 80s. They were there to try to capitalize. They were very greedy, right? They were trying to soak up all the money, and then at some point they turned on each other, and for turf and for more power. So this very much follows that, and Wesley Snipes, wow, what a portrayal, like I said, I don't know what movies he's done in between, but remember, he was in King of New York as a cop, right? He played a cop in King of New York. It wasn't like a huge role, but it was a pretty strong portrayal as a police officer in King of New York. And just FYI, his Wesley Snipes intended to play the role of the lead police officer in this movie. But this movie was written with Wesley Snipes in mind for the character of Nino Brown. So the production company, well, the production, right, the Mario Van Peebles and everybody else associated with the production of this movie were adamant that Wesley had to play Nino. And what a portrayal, man. Look at this guy. Like I said, if you looked at Wesley Snipes, right, and you didn't know anything about this movie, you're like, well, he plays a rapper, right? He plays a rapper during the 90s, right? And again, that's no accident, like I mentioned. These rappers, it wasn't necessarily, well, I guess it could have been reciprocal, right? Sometimes these drug kingpins saw rappers and wanted to emulate them. But those rappers were famous. They weren't usually rich like these guys, right? A lot of rappers were very famous back in the 90s, but they weren't necessarily rich, right? They had enough money to buy their jewelry, but these drug kingpins, that's the reason why I feel like the rappers were copying the drug kingpins. The drug kingpins weren't famous. They were famous in their neighborhoods, right? Everybody knew who they were, right? They weren't world famous because that would be counterproductive for their job, but they were well known in their neighborhoods and they were filthy rich, right? But they were filthy rich on the backs of a lot of lives and a lot of people whose lives they destroyed with their product, right? So I mean, it's interesting from an organizational standpoint, right? And it's just I think the movie really makes these, it's almost like Nino's an anti-hero, right? That's why he's very much akin to like Tony Montana in Scarface, right? Al Pacino's portrayal of Tony Montana in Scarface. And it's just, he's very charismatic. And then you can see why like a lot of folks wanted to be like some of these kingpins, right? They had everything, or seemingly they did. This is another shot of Wesley. You can see that cap. Again, with the shades, with the big gold chain, right? Like I said, riding around in a big car. Like these are the guys that were rolling around the neighborhood and with their music blasting, right? That was something that I remember in Brooklyn. You had those guys with the Jeeps, right? They were dressed, right? They had a lot of gold on. They had these sunglasses, and you knew they had money, more money than anybody else, right? More money than your dad or your mom. And you were just staring at them and like, wow, what are they doing to get that, right? And that's how a lot of youth got caught up in that situation, right? Luckily I had a very strong family unit. I never really felt tempted by that lifestyle and that image. But a lot of kids that didn't have that family unit, they probably were definitely tempted, right? They saw this and they were like, these guys are cool, right? Just like they look at the rappers, they're like, those guys are cool. I want to be like that. How could I be like that, right? And they find out short order that they have the option of just selling drugs, and they'll do it because, well, they just feel like the rewards of doing so greatly outweigh the benefits, right? If they're even thinking that much about it, right? Sometimes what happens in youth, right? And you see, especially with male youth in their 18 to 25 era, right? They do a lot of dumb things, right? If you remember back to when you were 18 to 25, and Morgan, sorry, you're currently between 18 and 25. I don't mean to be disparaging, right? But a lot of this male youth, it's because it probably of an underdeveloped frontal lobe, right? If you guys know about how the brain works, you'll know that the frontal lobe is in charge of future-oriented thinking, right? It's that part of your brain that lets you tells you, hey, don't do that because there are consequences. And unfortunately for males, I think in particular, males compared to females, in males 18 to 25, they're still developing that frontal lobe. And obviously there are individual differences, right? Some males don't have, they're developed just fine, but in general, you have this development that's happening in the frontal cortex, and it's causing these youth to be able to do some stupid things. You can see the jail cells are full of that, right? You get somebody that is under 18 or turns 18, commits a crime, goes to jail, right? Maybe kills somebody, goes to jail for like 20 years, And in jail, as their frontal cortex is developing, they're thinking like, whoa, what, how'd that happen? Like, why was I so stupid? Right. And that's why it's important for youth, right? Especially for our systems to be able to rehabilitate, because a lot of folks gone through that process. They did many huge mistakes when they were in that age era. And it's important to get those folks, the ones that have gone through the proper development, have rehabilitated themselves, to be able to go out there and then try to speak to youth that are in that were going along the same lines that they were. I hate to be preachy. I'm going to stop with the preaching now. But yeah, that's this movie is very powerful in that respect. So you can see here, Nino throughout this, he's basically just a drug kingpin that discovers crack. And it takes him to new heights, right? Crack took over in a very, very short amount of time. You can see here kind of with the earring, with the jewelry. Again, this guy's basically a rapper. And to his left, you can see his kind of his right. Well, on our left, his right? His right-hand man is G Money, right? And G Money is basically Manolo, right? If you remember Manolo from Scarface, that's G Money, right? A guy that ultimately ends up, having a falling out, right? He gets jealous, right, and somehow betrays, Nino. And in that respect, right, he doesn't do it. He does so knowingly. Manolo doesn't betray Tony knowingly, right? He basically just goes out and marries his sister. That really wasn't a betrayal, but that's when this movie kind of takes an angle of kind of like The Godfather, right? So besides having members of the Italian mafia in the movie, right? They have a portrayal of the Italian mob in the movie. G Money is very much like Fredo to Nino's Michael, right? They're not brothers, but they call themselves brothers, right? In the movie, they have a phrase called, they say, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And they say that because they call themselves the Cash Money Brothers. This crew is called the Cash Money Brothers. Let me just show you a picture of the crew. Again, that's another aspect of this movie this is not a gang in as much, right? It's a criminal organization, but before that organization, it's run by this crew called the Cash Money Brothers. And I don't, besides G Money, I won't go into all the other members. There is the Man. There's Christopher Williams. And I forget the lady that plays the female member of the crew. But these guys are, the bad guys, right? But they are essentially members of the community that they had ambition, right? They had greed. They had this need for power, and they saw crack as their way to achieve those goals. And and it's a very, very interesting dynamic here. So yeah, it really does kind of like, it's not that you're necessarily rooting for Nino, but sometimes you find yourself rooting for Nino, right? Like you empathize with the situation, even though you don't agree with everything he does. You kind of you start learning about his background and his situation, and you're like, yeah, I understand that, right? It's very, very, very similar to Tony Montana. So yeah, it's hopefully, like I said, I'll cover Scarface, the 1983 movie, for you guys, maybe with my brother. So we'll see about that. Yeah. So you have here the Cash Money Brothers, led by Nino Brown, and you have, like I said, what they're trying to accomplish. They're just trying to get all the money and all the power they can get, and they have decided that they're going to do that by selling crack. And then the flip side, you can see how insipid and insidious like the situation is, where you got members of the community, right? You got this reverend here. He's a minister, and he's basically side by side with Nino Brown, because Nino knows that he has to align himself, right? He has to kind of make himself a role model, even though he shouldn't be a role model for the youth. So you can see him there appearing with the youth, giving money out to the youth, trying to portray himself very much like a John Gotti would, right? In the neighborhood, essentially handing out money, appearing to be the man of the people, maybe like a Robin Hood, very similar to like Frank White, right? And he knows that the kids are the future, so he's trying to get in early with them, and he's giving them money. So you can see how like some of the angles here that the movie's taking. And it's very powerful, very, very, very powerful. And obviously you can't blame the kids, right? These kids don't know any better, but you start thinking about these adults, right? That minister, and how he basically kind of sold out his community, right? And maybe he did so out of fear. Maybe he was like, he knew that Nino wouldn't have it any other way, so he's kind of like has to do this. But at the same time, you're like, wow, that's such a crazy kind of a choice, right, to make for somebody like a minister who's like considered a pillar of the community. So yeah. And then, right, this is the element that moves away from Scarface. It's Scotty Appleton, played by Ice-T. What a portrayal, right? So Scotty is a police officer, but he's not just any police officer, right? This guy grew up in the same neighborhood as Nino Brown, right? He could have been Nino Brown, right? Like, that's the thing about Scotty, is that you can see he's not a guy you mess with, right? Even though he's considered a good guy, he's a good guy with the edge, right? He's kind of like Wolverine, right? You can see he's very urban, right? He's very like he's dressed like a drug dealer, right? He might, maybe without all the jewelry, but he's a good guy, right? He's the guy that's trying to chase down all the Nino Browns. And Ice-T is he did such a great job. Remember, Wesley Snipes wanted to do this role, right? Wesley Snipes intended to play Scotty Appleton, but they were like, no, you're Nino, right? Like, we wrote this role for you, with you in mind. But Ice-T, wow, did he do a tremendous job. Now, Ice-T, this might be like his first serious foray into acting, right? Like, we've seen him in movies. I remember watching him in Breakin', the breakdancing movie Breakin' or Breakin' 2, right? He played like the DJ, or the MC, right? The kind of the MC part, not necessarily the DJ. I think he was the MC, right? Because he was rapping in those movies, right? But he was like the party guy, right? This is like when Ice-T starts transitioning. His music really becomes kind of like the music of the street, right? He starts making social commentary about things that are happening in street life, right? And drugs, the police, right? He's becoming a real voice of the youth, right? The guy that knows what he's talking about because he's kind of been through it, right? He knows. And the fact that he did this role, he just comes across as so believable, as Scotty. And I'll show you just kind of you can see kind of like the headwear that he's wearing is essentially kind of like very similar to a lot of Jamaicans would wear. And this is because, Ice-T had these dreadlocks, right? But you can see here, like I said, he's got the leather, this is a cool guy, right? And you can see there, he's got the, during the early 90s, he's wearing that Africa medallion, right? That was very popular amongst the African-American community in the early 90s. Anybody that grew up in New York City, like I did, had saw those medallions. There was like a movement. Remember, while this crack epidemic was sweeping the city, there was this other movement of social consciousness, right? That was happening. You could hear it in some of the music that was getting popular. Tribe Called Quest would be one of them. There were several others, but I'll pick a Tribe Called Quest. Obviously, you have Chuck D and Flavor Flav. That was kind of a more militant vibe, but there was kind of this movement. It was very much akin to Marcus Garvey, right? This idea of reconnecting with the homeland in Africa, amongst African Americans. And it was very beautiful, like the colors, right? A lot of the streetwear was reflecting the colors of Africa, right? You had the greens, the yellows, and the reds, very vibrant colors. And that medallion, I remember thinking, I was like, man, I would love to be able to like wear that medallion. I probably wouldn't get away with it, right? Right. I just thought it was a very, very beautiful movement that was happening in the African American community during that time, especially with the music as well that was reflecting it. And it was amazing that was happening at the same time that this crack epidemic was just sweeping and destroying whole communities. But yeah, Ice-T he just killed it in this role. So we had Wesley Snipes and Ice-T just absolutely giving performances that were tremendous. And again, it's not like this movie is the highest form of art. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I'm obviously doing very similar to what I always do, which is projecting my own thoughts and views onto the movie, and hopefully you guys can indulge me on that. But yeah, you can see here Mario Van Peebles kind of talking Ice-T through the scene at a wedding, right? You can see like the dress, the style that's being kind of shown here with the shades, right? It's kind of like stylish, but also badass, right? And this is at this point, Ice-T is infiltrating Nino Brown's organization himself, right? So he's already in this stage in this movie, right here in this scene. But I'll go over a little bit more. You can see here, right? Ice-T, he's got the Africa medallion, right? The continent of Africa on the medallion. And he's essentially being introduced by Stone to his new partner, who's played by Judd Nelson. And if you guys know Judd Nelson, well, you probably are. He's known for being part of what's called the Brat Pack, right? You remember the Rat Pack with Frank Sinatra and company. But in the 80s, you had the Brat Pack. So you had Ali Sheedy, Anthony Michael Hall, Molly Ringwald, you had Emilio Estevez, and you also had Judd Nelson. And he really, like I think for me, his iconic role was as I believe his name was Bender in The Breakfast Club, right? Just killed it. And then he returns in this movie as kind of like this rogue white cop, right? That's basically, he's like the white version of Ice-T in this movie. Like they're called, like Stone's character calls them New Jack Cops, right? Like these guys are not playing by the rules. We need New Jack Cops to catch these New Jack criminals. And that's when, right? That's when this movie really starts getting into like parallels with the Untouchables, right? If you remember when we covered the Untouchables, you saw that Elliot Ness, right? Who's kind of like, I can see some of it with Scotty, the parallels of Elliot Ness. But they are trying to assemble a crew that's willing to go and do what it takes to catch these criminals. And you can see that at first, Scotty and his partner don't get along, right? They're not used to working with other cops, but they know that they really want to get Nino, so they agree to join forces. And you can see they assemble a kind of a very much another crew, very similar to the Untouchables with Elliot Ness. And this is the crew right here. You got Park, which is played well by Russell Wong. You got Stone, who's kind of leading the leading man. And then I forget the character that Judd Nelson plays, but again, he's basically the white counterpart to right, the loose cannon, the white version of Scotty. And you can see Scotty there. Like I said, he's just very badass, right? Like this is a badass crew. You can tell like this is not a crew you want to mess with. So I really love the kind of the parallels to the Untouchables here. Again, they're all signing up. They may not like working with each other, but they agreed that they want to get Nino Brown. And at first, they try to go the traditional route, right? Remember, at some point early in the movie, Pookie, right? Ice-T goes and tries to kind of incriminate Pookie to kind of get him. And Pookie runs away. Ice-T ends up shooting him, and then essentially kind of feels sorry for him. He feels sorry for Pookie and his situation, being hooked on crack, and then kind of befriends him and helps him get off the crack and get into rehab, right? And it's just a very, very powerful like message about like why Scotty's doing what he's doing. And he has other reasons as well, right? He has a kind of a personal reason, right? He lost his mother to street violence, right? And I think his mother was a teacher in the movie, and then she ends up getting killed by a gang member. Later on, we learn that gang member was actually Wesley Snipes, which just adds a lot more of that tension between the two. But for now, Scotty befriends Pookie, and Pookie, to show his appreciation, kind of agrees to go undercover for Scotty. It ends up getting infiltrated and killed along the lines, right? And that really kind of just heightens, right, everything for Scotty, right? Like the emotional investment in catching Nino Brown. So just has a very, very powerful portrayal here. And you can see in the end, at some point, Pookie gets killed. Ice-T agrees to infiltrate Nino Brown's operation himself, right? Which we showed early on, right? We showed here in this this photo, he's already infiltrated, right? He's already gained the trust of Nino Brown, and then at some point they go and they're able to get him indicted, right? Well, meaning they're able to get him to trial. But what happens is Nino Brown ends up flipping the tables, ends up essentially getting off with a slap on the wrist, right? And that infuriates Scotty, right? Scotty had a chance to actually kill Nino Brown earlier in the movie, but Judd Nelson's character convinced him not to. And then he ends up yelling at him, and essentially you could see kind of the smugness on Nino Brown's face as he's exiting the courtroom. And I won't kind of go into like how it ends, but it's a really great ending, right? It ends very, very similar to Scarface, and to Tony Montana and Scarface, right? And kind of such a great movie, very, very powerful. Again, some really good headwear, that I recognized growing up in Brooklyn in the 80s. And I think this movie is it's definitely a lot better and a lot more powerful and a lot deeper than I've probably let on in this live stream. But yeah, that's all the photos I got for you. I mean, that was a very, very quick overview of New Jack City. And man, what a powerful movie. If you guys haven't seen New Jack City, hopefully you guys were okay with spoilers and maybe you guys watch it. I don't know. I think it just recently was on either Netflix or on Prime Video, but it should be very easy to get. It's a very, very popular movie, right? Even more popular than King of New York. But I think those two movies really go well together, right? In terms of like the idea of fashion, right? I wore this flat cap, right? It's not a Kangol, right? Like Nino Brown wore in the film. It's a Hugo. It's a Hugo flat cap, and I really do like it. It's good. It very much reminds me of the flat caps, the Kangol flat caps, maybe with a little bit less shininess, right? It's like those Kangols. A lot of them, I think, were velour. Right, they had that sheen that screamed velour. This doesn't have that sheen. This is kind of more like a regular felt. But man, what a great! I love this flat cap. So yeah, that's basically New Jack City. Again, that movie probably deserves a much deeper analysis. Maybe one day I'll revisit that. But I just wanted to have something for you guys to chew on, right? Because this is like I said, the 80s, the late 80s and 90s were like my era in New York. And this movie, man, what a hit, right? Like I said, King of New York was more like a sleeper that caught on later on. But I think New Jack City was a hit right from the get-go. And I think Ice-T and Wesley Snipes and the whole entire crew, cast and crew that were involved in the making of that movie were a big part of it. I mean, just like a perfect storm. I think at some point they were planning to do a sequel. Unfortunately, it never happened. Ice-T talked about it, and I really wish they did a sequel. It might have not come out as good as the original, as most sequels tend to do, but I think this movie really had a lot of legs, right? It had a lot going for it. So yeah, you guys can let me know if you guys watch this, in syndication. Let me know what you thought about New Jack City and kind of the style that you saw portrayed. Maybe some of you guys kind of grew up when and where I grew up in New York City around that time, and kind of has some unique perspective into the crack epidemic that was the center of this movie. But yeah, now I'm gonna close this out and just kind of say, hey, keep subscribing, keep supporting the channel, right? Keep supporting my channel, keep supporting Paul and Brad and Josh and anybody else affiliated with this channel, right? Once I hit 100 subscribers, I'm going to give away this Knox custom, right? I'll do a video. I'll randomly select anybody that comments on that video, and they will get this hat. I will probably work out shipping details with you to make sure that I can get it to you, or I can get it to somebody else that if you don't want it, but you know somebody that would want it, I can have it sent to that person for you. So yeah, but you know where this is going, right? Even if you don't subscribe to my channel, even if you don't support anybody on my Good Luke's network, there's one thing you got to do. One thing you got to do, or else I'll get Nino Brown and well, maybe I'll get Scotty Appleton after you, right? And, not to do anything harmful to you, right? Not to kind of sell you crack, not to harm you with physical violence, but just to go boop and hit that subscribe button, right? Or otherwise, you could just do what I ask and just stay hatting, my friend. Have a great day. Ciao, everybody. Ciao.